Do any of the MPs listed on this report of compromised members who are working against the interests of Canada, do any of those MPs currently sit in cabinet, yes or no?
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. As all of you know by now, the talk on Parliament Hill is treason. Today, we want to get you up to speed as to what has happened since our last video and give you a deep dive on the actual report that caused all of this chaos. And, amazingly, tie all of this back to a warning given by the original CSIS whistleblower, so you'll definitely want to stay tuned to this one until the very end.
So in our first video, Dominic LeBlanc appears before the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security to face questions on the NSICOP report that dropped earlier this week, and Jennifer O'Connell becomes famous for the wrong reason.
The NSICOP report that was recently released reveals that parliamentarians, including members of our House and the House of Commons, knowingly and deliberately assisted a hostile foreign state to the detriment of the people of Canada. This places a cloud of suspicion over every single member of the House, elected members. Do you know the names of these people?
Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Caputo, thank you for the question. I am updated regularly, and I think in a complete way, by our intelligence agencies, by the RCMP, by the Department of Public Safety. So I am very comfortable that I have the information that I need to do the work that I have to do, but you'll understand that discussing the details, particularly of the most sensitive information, is not something that we want to do publicly.
Well, I'm not asking you to discuss sensitive information. I'm asking whether you know the names. Do you know the names, yes or no?
I know a number of names that were surfaced in various intelligence products that I have seen, but I was not in the room when the Committee of Parliamentarians did their work. I don't have the exact details of which documents they saw and didn't see, but I'm very comfortable that I have access to all of the most important intelligence information, which would include, in some cases, names.
Okay, so people who are alleged, and in some cases, according to our intelligence communities, to have committed some of the most serious offenses known to Canadian law. Are you prepared to release those names, yes or no?
No, Mr. Chair.
You will not release the names of members, elected members, operating in the House of Commons. Do you think Canadians have a right to know, yes or no?
Mr. Chair, I think it's important for Canadians to understand that these names are contained in intelligence reports. In some cases, it's uncorroborated or unverified intelligence information. I think we would need to be very careful to understand that, as the director himself has said, intelligence is often a series of pieces of a puzzle. One particular piece of the puzzle, an intelligence source or information, may not have a context, may be discredited or altered by subsequent information. So the idea that there's a perfect list of names that is entirely reliable that should be released to the public is simply irresponsible.
I will say that LeBlanc has a point there, actually. I hate to agree with the guy, but he does have a point that this is just intelligence. It's not proof. So it is theoretically possible that someone's name could be on that list and it does not belong on that list.
Well, the issue, because I've read a lot of the report, Fox hasn't. The issue in what you will find in the report is the report doesn't say allegedly. That's the big problem. The report says they did. So there's no ambiguity in the report. And that's the issue. So, there's not this business of, well, it was reported, that allegedly. It was reported that, this kind of happened. It actually categorically says this is what they did. And this is the issue, because otherwise I would agree with Fox. It could be irresponsible, because if it said, some members allegedly did this, well, then you don't know for sure. Then do you?
Well, to my point, what I was going to say further was that the left doesn't really seem to care about things that are alleged or may have happened. They're willing to lambaste anyone and everyone. How many people has the left canceled? How many careers has the left destroyed over misinterpretations or allegations?
Right.
So now they're sensitive to it all of a sudden is kind of my line of thinking. It just seems odd.
Well, and here's a really important point. Cameron McDonald and Tony Utano didn't participate in treason.
That we know of.
What we do know is they allegedly, because we don't know for sure, but allegedly they lied and helped commit fraud and helped defraud the Canadian government. Those are all allegations. They don't have their jobs. They have been suspended without pay. Why? Because they're too great a risk.
Well, that's it. These MPs in this report are a huge risk to Canadians and to our democracy. I think they should be releasing the names and letting all of us know.
Well, and we'll come back to risk a little later when Andrew Scheer gets into question period with Dominic LeBlanc. But let's keep going.
The NSICOP report doesn't equivocate like you just did. The NSICOP report is clear, incredibly clear on names. Do you think Canadians should have the right to know?
Clear on names,
I'm not done my
Mr.
question,
Chair.
Minister. Do you think Canadians have the right to know when they go to cast an X next to the name of somebody in the next 15 months, the very thing that we're dealing with here in Bill C-70, do you think they have the right to know whether their member is under the influence of a hostile foreign state? Yes or no?
Mr. Chair, I think Canadians know, and I'm confident that they have every reason to be reassured that our intelligence agencies and the RCMP take their responsibilities extraordinarily seriously, have the resources necessary to investigate, and should the RCMP, for example, in their wisdom decide that charges should be laid in consultation with the appropriate prosecutors, that's our system in a rule of law democracy. It's not simply releasing a series of names or doing, as Mr. Caputo says he's concerned about, casting aspersions himself on everybody by pretending that there's some perfect list of names that the government's not releasing. No other Western democracy knows this, and Mr. Caputo knows that certainly in the government of Mr. Harper, even that kind of conversation wouldn't have been conceivable. So I think there's a certain disingenuous element, Mr. Chair, in Mr. Caputo's theatrics this morning.
Disingenuous element. Under Mr. Harper's government, we did not get a report that said foreign state actors had infiltrated. Under Mr. Harper's government, we did not have reports saying that foreign state actors had dealt with this. Now, under current legislation, you can disclose top secret information when in the public interest. What would be more in the public interest than a person who could be elected and they are under the thumb of a hostile state actor? You can do that. So when you talk about disingenuous, you can do this. Why won't you before the next election?
Mr. Chair, speaking of disingenuous, in Mr. Harper's government, the National Security Committee of Parliamentarians didn't exist because Mr. Harper's government didn't believe that parliamentarians should have access to this information or be able to review the work of our intelligence agencies. Mr. Harper's government in 2013, CSIS publicly identified an increasing risk of foreign interference in our democratic institutions, and the Harper government did absolutely nothing.
You know what the Harper government didn't have as well? Didn't have CSIS whistleblowers not trusting that the government was going to do the right thing and release classified information through the mainstream media.
Well, that's because Harper listened to his CSIS operatives.
Right.
Because he didn't have a reason not to.
Right. And as we have seen, there is a pattern of this Liberal government not taking this stuff seriously, not being transparent, and not telling anybody it's even going on, and in fact going so far as to deny that it goes on.
So again, Mr. Chair, I think it's important to have a context to these comments.
So you are okay with us going into an election, people putting an X beside a name where they have a cloud of suspicion, every single one of us. Let's face it, Minister. I think if there were six Conservatives on that list and no other Liberals, we would have had the names. Let's be honest here.
Thank you, Mr. Caputo. The
No,
Minister
pardon
may
me.
answer.
I think I have another minute here.
No, you don't.
Nope. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
The Minister may answer if you wish.
Mr. Chair, again, Mr. Caputo makes something up. If there were 6 Conservatives and no other political parties, of course we would release the list. Mr. Chair, I'm not going to violate the Security of Information Act and risk prosecution for a political stunt, and I think Mr. Caputo knows better.
We go now to Mr. Gahir. 6 minutes, please.
I think we can all guess that the Liberals absolutely would be throwing the Conservatives. Well, they wouldn't even be throwing them under the bus because it would be deserved. But they would be releasing the names if it was all Conservatives.
Well, and that has been proven because this stuff came up about Han Dong and the Prime Minister did nothing. He let Han Dong run in the race. He didn't follow up after the race when Han Dong won the riding of Don Valley North and investigate. He didn't do anything. Why? Because that would cast doubt on what was going on in the election. He was only too happy to have a Liberal win, and we don't need to worry about that because that's going to put a black mark on this election. We don't need that. So we've seen it. We have 100% seen it.
Different point of order, Chair.
Mr. Dennis on point of order.
Thank you, Chair. During Mr. Caputo's round at the end, Ms. O'Connell was literally shouting at him across the floor. And now she's saying, "Boo-hoo, get over it."
Thank you.
Respectfully,
Thank you.
Chair,
Thank you.
I think you should call this member to order. It is a point of order.
Thank you.
You're shouting.
Mr. Dennis.
Shouting
Mr.
at another
Dennis.
member. No, sorry, I've got a point of
Speak
order.
to the chair, please.
Great.
I hear your point of order. I would
you.
encourage all members to not talk across the table,
Yeah.
to talk through the chair when they recognize. It would be helpful to us all.
I
Thank
hope you
Mr.
call Ms. O'Connell to order because she wasn't cross-talking. She was shouting in order to disrupt Mr. Caputo's round of questions.
Question period and committee are different. They fall under different rules. You can heckle in question period. You cannot heckle in committee.
Right, and there's a really reprehensible part of this committee where Jennifer O'Connell actually accuses MP Villemur of the Bloc of being sexist and, pulls this leftist victim card. We're not going to show it because I don't want to give her any airtime at all. But this is the type of reprehensible human being and member of parliament that Jennifer O'Connell is.
And, I mean, we don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but we have heard this about her, that she's not very well respected from the other MPs. We'll just put it that way.
So you hear she's saying boo-hoo, get over it, when the Conservatives are questioning Dominic LeBlanc about literal traitors. We're not using this pedantically. We're not using this semantically. We're using this literally.
Like, by the rule of law, this falls under treason, what is being accused of happening here.
Right, and we covered that in our previous video. It falls under the legal definition of treason. And she's saying, boo-hoo. Like, she's not taking this seriously at all. Makes you wonder, is she one of the names?
Well, I was just going to say that. And again, it is absolutely reprehensible. Every MP in that house should be terrified that this is going on.
Right.
Because this is affecting the democracy under which our country functions.
And the problem is because the Liberals won't release the names, now Canadians are looking at all 338 members of Parliament and asking, is it you?
Next, we go to question period later that afternoon, where Andrew Scheer is unrelenting in going after Dominic LeBlanc on why they won't tell Canadians who these people are.
Mr. Speaker, governments from countries that are hostile to Canada, who actively try to harm our citizens and our country, interfered with the most fundamental aspect of our society, our democracy. An intelligence report claims that there are members of this House whose loyalty is not solely to the people of Canada, but to foreign governments who wish us harm. And what has been the Liberal response so far? They won't release the names. And now the Liberal member for Pickering-Uxbridge says, quote, boo-hoo, get over it. Instead of telling Canadians to just walk it off, why don't they release the names of MPs who are working against Canada?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my friend from Regina Capel knows very well that no government is in a position to release sensitive information about particular pieces of intelligence. I have a suggestion for him. He sits a couple of seats away in this place from his leader. If they were sincere in understanding some of the information underlying the public version of the report of the National Security Committee of Parliamentarians, his leader could avail himself of the offer that I'm happy to reiterate again today, to get the security clearance, get all the information that the Committee on Parliamentarians had, and then he could come to a reasoned judgment in this place.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
This isn't about offering secret briefings to MPs who have to keep all that information secret. It's about releasing the names so that Canadians can know which MPs are working against the interests of Canada. So I've got a very simple question. He should be able to answer this one. Do any of the MPs listed on this report of compromised members who are working against the interests of Canada, do any of those MPs currently sit in cabinet, yes or no?
Good question.
That is a good question.
Okay, now we get back to risk. Remember I said we were going to come back to this. So, if a member of the Conservatives or if a member of the Bloc were one of these MPs, it would be terrible, yes. They should be punished, yes. But the risk in terms of the government isn't as high as it could be because they're not in government. They don't have security clearance to seize things unless they have specific clearance and they sit on certain committees. Now, Scheer just asked the most relevant question pertaining to the whole report. Do any of these names belong to Liberals sitting in cabinet? That raises the risk profile to the top tier. Because imagine if you have the Minister of Public Safety as one of these names. A, he's Dominic LeBlanc. B, he has security clearance to see all kinds of briefings. Which would mean, if he was on that list, he could be potentially passing security information to foreign states.
Well, and he also has control of the file.
Right. Imagine Chrystia Freeland, Minister of Finance. There's many, many different ministers of cabinet that this would be frightening if they were the ones that were on this list. So, as it relates back to the original point about due process, you have to weigh risk versus consequence. So, the risk of you not doing anything is that, state secrets, the security of the country, all could be going out the door. Versus some uncomfortable conversations and a really bad PR campaign, and, let's be honest, maybe destroying the professional career of some of these MPs. But again, it comes back to, as you'll see in this report, it doesn't suggest. It states that this is what's going on.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I'll give full points to my friend from Regina Capel to try and get me to do indirectly what he knows very well I can't do directly. Mr. Speaker, I'll remind our friend that our government is the first government to take this issue seriously. In the previous Conservative government, they did absolutely nothing to secure our democratic institutions, in spite of public warnings from CSIS for the last 2 years they were in government. I worked last summer with my friend from Regina Capel to set up the Hogg Commission, for example. We look forward to Justice Hogg's recommendations and would be happy to work with him in terms of implementing them.
Hear, hear. The honourable member from Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, they sat on warnings from our intelligence agencies so that they could protect their own partisan interests. And they have refused to hand over cabinet confidences to the Hogue Commission. But this one should actually be really simple. Cabinet ministers get to see everything. They get a say on everything the Government of Canada does, and they get to personally lobby the Prime Minister any day they want. Can the minister assure Canadians that nobody who sits around the cabinet table today is on this list of compromised MPs who are working against Canada?
I'll save you the answer. He doesn't answer. And that's a problem.
That is a problem because Canadians deserve to know. Again, risk versus reward. If you have, say, 10 names on this list and those names are released and those 10 careers are destroyed and those 10 people, well, I mean, they're not going to be in the House of Commons anymore, right? They've lost their jobs. Maybe they might end up losing their homes. Like, bad things could happen, right? But that pales in comparison to what could happen if they continue to be in their position or are reelected in the next election. Again, risk versus reward, essentially.
So now we get to the third video. There's technically 4, but you're only going to see 3. And you're going to say, what? So Chrystia Freeland actually ran away from a press conference and refused to answer questions. In the press conference following the one where she kind of forgot her voice for, a minute and a half. But we're not going to bother showing you that one because it's just infuriating to watch her just run away from the microphone and the reporters kind of, yell after her. But we're going to show you another press conference that happened today where she couldn't run away from because it was at an announcement.
Hi, I'm Chris Glover with my question is for the Deputy Prime Minister. I want to talk about the list of politicians that hasn't been made public from the report on foreign interference. And the question is your government prepared to send voters to the polls without knowing if the person that they're voting for is colluding with a foreign power?
Okay. Thank you for the question. And let me start by saying our government takes foreign interference in Canada, in Canadian democracy, very seriously. We have put in place more tools to fight foreign interference than any previous government. Our colleague, the Minister of Public Safety, testified extensively on this issue to the House of Commons Committee yesterday. One of the things he said, which I'd like to reinforce, is that law enforcement bodies of jurisdiction are seized of the issue.
A quick answer to that question?
Please don't put words in my mouth.
So what he said is, so no is the quick answer to that question? And she's saying, please don't put words in my mouth. Well, then answer it. Like, answer it.
Right, because by not answering that specific question, like, it's just awful. Like, it's gross. By not answering that question, it makes it sound like the Liberals are willing to allow Canadians to go into the next election and potentially vote for somebody who has been colluding with a foreign government.
Right. And it casts doubt on the entire election. That's a huge problem, folks.
That is a huge problem. I believe in this country and I believe in our democracy. I just think we need to get these corrupt Liberals out of the way so that we can have Canada back. Now, switching gears, we get to the meat of the matter. The NSICOP report, which is located in the description as always, if you would like to read it in full. They included this handy chart on page 16 where they define what is, what could be, and what is not foreign interference. We'll now skip down and start at item 55, as this is where things start to go off the rails in a huge way.
Some elected officials, however, began wittingly assisting foreign state actors soon after their election. There's no allegedly there. There's no perhaps there. There's no reports suggest there. This is a statement, folks. They're saying this happened. Now, this isn't one piece of intelligence here, okay? This is the committee reviewing intelligence, and this is one of their findings. So, this is where I was talking about before. There's no alleged here. They're saying it happened. And they have 3 different footnotes here. 137, 138, and 139. Here's where this concerns me. So, if you look at 137, it states CSIS ****. So that's basically redacted. 138, CSIS ****. Report for the CSIS director. Look at the date. 2020. This intelligence has been with the Prime Minister and the Liberals since 2020. 4 years. 4 years. And then you go back to Dominic LeBlanc and Chrystia Freeland. I just want to be clear. We take this very, very seriously. This report demonstrates that you take it anything but seriously.
Well, they take it so seriously that they've already allowed us to go to the polls once since this information has been made available.
Right. 139, CSIS 2022-2023. Annual report to the Minister on CSIS operational activities, August 2023. We're coming up on a year of that piece of intelligence. So this is showing that CSIS has been feeding the Prime Minister and Privy Council and the National Security Advisor and the Minister of Public Safety the same intelligence repeatedly. Nothing has happened. Number 56. You will notice that there's not redactions in the classical sense as like black marks everywhere. What they do is they actually will just remove the content of the paragraph and then put in a placeholder description. So it says this paragraph was deleted to remove injurious or privileged information. The paragraph described a textbook example of foreign interference that saw a foreign state support a witting politician, meaning a member of parliament with a name, and it described in detail how foreign interference supported that politician, and the politician knew about it. CSIS provided specific intelligence to the secret cleared representatives of the party shortly before the election and to the Prime Minister shortly after. Who does this sound like? Fox?
If I had to guess, I would say it could be Han Dong.
This sounds exactly like Han Dong.
Now, we don't have proof. Let's just say we don't know for sure it's Han Dong, but there are a lot of similarities in what we can gather from this redaction and also what we know about the situation with Han Dong.
Continuing on, the Prime Minister discussed this incident with the committee and the steps he took in response to intelligence reporting, which he didn't take any. And he stated as such in the inquiry. Now, the interesting thing is that Han Dong, when this came out in Global News, he stood up, he cried, he resigned from the Liberal caucus, decided to sue Global News. Now, the interesting thing is that Global News says, no, we stand by a report, thank you very much. And then you saw Han Dong in the public inquiry not be able to refute any of the intelligence that was put towards him. And then you have this parliamentary committee basically saying, yeah, this happened. So this is getting very concerning, folks. 57. This paragraph was revised to remove injurious or privileged information. In this context, CSIS assessed that the PRC believes that its relationship with some members of Parliament rests on a quid pro quo that any member's engagement with the PRC will result in the PRC mobilizing its network in the members' favor. The PRC would show support for lawmakers in ridings with large numbers of ethnic Chinese voters and who maintain close relationships with the Chinese ethno-cultural community, including through Chinese leaders and business people. So what's that saying? What that's saying is that the People's Republic of China has open relationships with some politicians. And if the politicians do something for the People's Republic of China, the People's Republic of China responds in kind during election time and mobilizes people in their ridings to vote for them. And the Prime Minister has the balls to say, our elections are secure. Foreign interference isn't a big thing to worry about. This is outrageous, folks. So next we go down to item 164.
Unfortunately, the committee has also seen troubling intelligence that some parliamentarians are, in the words of the intelligence services, semi-witting or witting participants in the efforts of foreign states to interfere in our politics. These examples include: Number 1, communicating frequently with foreign missions before or during a political campaign to obtain support from community groups or businesses which the diplomatic missions promise to quietly mobilize in a candidate's favor. Number 2, accepting knowingly or through willful blindness funds or benefits from foreign missions or other proxies which have been layered or otherwise disguised to conceal their source. Number 3, providing foreign diplomatic officials with privileged information on the work or opinions of fellow parliamentarians, knowing that such information will be used by those officials to inappropriately pressure parliamentarians to change their positions. Number 4, responding to the requests or direction of foreign officials to improperly influence parliamentary colleagues or parliamentary business to the advantage of a foreign state. And number 5, providing information learned in confidence from the government to a known intelligence officer of a foreign state. These are particularly concerning examples of behavior by a few parliamentarians. Some may be illegal, but are unlikely to lead to criminal charges, owing to Canada's failure to address the long-standing issue of protecting classified information and methods in judicial processes. Regardless, all the behaviors are deeply unethical and, the committee would submit, contrary to the oaths and affirmations parliamentarians take to conduct themselves in the best interest of Canada. While some of the committee's recommendations should help the government to address instances of foreign interference abetted by parliamentarians, the committee reminds its colleagues that their duty as parliamentarians is to the people of Canada.
What does that all basically say? It says that there's more than one, probably less than 10, parliamentarians that are knowingly collaborating with foreign states.
Or they are just like, well, I don't want to hear about it. Like,
Right.
Like they're practicing willful blindness is what the report says.
Now, if I interpret this correctly, where it says some may be illegal but are unlikely to lead to criminal charges owing to Canada's failure to address the long-standing issue of protecting classified information, this is what we're talking about that's happening right now. Because LeBlanc won't disclose this stuff. That's why it's saying, well, how can you even release this stuff to the RCMP with these processes in place that by definition keep the stuff secret? I don't know. But here's the interesting thing. We talked about this report. CSIS didn't have whistleblowers during the Harper era. CSIS didn't have whistleblowers during the Chrétien era.
That's because those prime ministers listened to CSIS.
Now, we did a video a long time ago, March of 2023, when the original CSIS whistleblower blew the whistle and started all of this mess. This is an excerpt from their op-ed that they did in the Globe and Mail. Take a look. This is in the words of the whistleblower. When I first became aware of the significance of the threat posed by outside interference to our democratic institutions, I worked, as many unnamed and tireless colleagues, to equip our leaders with the knowledge and the tools needed to take action against it. Months passed, and then years. The threat grew in urgency. Serious action remained unforthcoming. I endeavored, alone and with others, to raise concerns about this threat directly to those in a position to hold our top officials to account. Regrettably, those individuals were unable to do so. In the time that passed, another federal election had come and gone. The threat of interference had grown, and it had become increasingly clear that no serious action was being considered. Worse still, evidence of senior public officials ignoring interference was beginning to mount. Now, we didn't know exactly what that meant at the time. But seeing this NSICOP report, seeing the dates on some of the intelligence briefings, Fox said before, another election occurred after some of these briefings were actually delivered. This is following the timeline of the whistleblower. So in short, they were seeing this stuff back then. They were shouting to the top people in CSIS. Those people in CSIS were trying to present this to the government, and the government did nothing.
And it makes you wonder why. Were they benefiting? That's the question.
Well, and it's interesting because we were talking to a friend of ours about this, going on over the last couple days. And it was in the really early stages of this. So the Conservatives hadn't actually raised a comment on it. And he'd asked, well, why aren't the Conservatives saying anything? Is it because Conservatives are implicated? And we said, we don't know. We'll have to see what happens. Sure enough, the next day, Michael Chong stands up and says, release the names. We don't care if Conservatives are involved in this. Release the names.
Because we want to know who they are so we can have them removed and possibly charged criminally.
Right. This isn't a partisan issue to them. There's only one party that's making this partisan, and it's the one party that has a history, a demonstrated history of accepting foreign interference or ignoring it in order to benefit their election prospects. And that's the Liberal Party, and that's Justin Trudeau. We need the NDP, who have been, at least up to now, on the Conservative side when it comes to foreign interference, and on the Bloc side when it comes to foreign interference. They actually need to do something good with the quote-unquote power that they have and say, listen, you guys need to release these names or this supply and confidence agreement is over.
And I mean it this time. No more empty threats, Jagmeet.
Now, we have no reason to think that that would be likely at all. But the thing is this foreign interference stuff has scared the bejesus out of the NDP before, and they've wanted to remain as far away from it as possible. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, but the Conservatives need to keep hammering on this.
Because this is a very serious issue, and we don't mean to scare you guys, but this is our democracy. And some of you may be scared or feeling helpless.
But here's the positive part about this, folks. Like, I know this sucks getting all of this bad news, and you're hearing it over and over. But here's the positive part. From 2015 up until 2023, we heard nothing. Through the work of the Conservatives, some CSIS whistleblower patriots, and I'll even say the Bloc, this is coming out now. That is the good news. We are finally getting sunlight on what has been withheld from the Canadian people.
And we, the Canadian people, are the ones who can demand change. This is our democracy. It belongs to us. And we cannot let them get away with what they are accused of. We need to put pressure on our MPs. Get those names. We want those names. Canadians want those names.
So, if you are still inclined to write letters, be writing them to the NDP, telling them to force the government to release these names.
You know, it doesn't even matter who your MP is in this case. Your MP could be Liberal, Conservative, Bloc, NDP, Independent, doesn't matter. Contact your MP and tell them, I need you to work to get those names for Canadians, because we want to know that the person we are voting for in the next election is bound to Canada, that they put Canada above everything else.